Welcome to the Mussar Video Blog. We have a class here Sunday nights, Chovos HaLevavos, Duties of the Heart, and I want to share with you something that we studied this past week. Chovos HaLevavos tells a story, and it's a fairly known story, that there was a pious man walking along with his students, and they passed by a dead dog, the carcass of a dog. And the students made a comment that, ooh, how terribly awful is the stench from this dog. It really smells horrendous. And the teacher said to them, but look how white are its teeth. He wanted to focus on something positive. So at first glance, you wonder, like, was it so bad to say that it smelled? I mean, they're in violation of no prohibition in the Torah. The Torah does not forbid us to say that dead dogs smell. It also doesn't forbid us to say that the garbage smells or anything like that. To speak bad about people, of course, that's a problem. But something like that is not a problem. And yet he felt it was important to gently reprimand them by saying, but focus on the teeth. The teeth are so white. A seemingly unimportant piece of information. And the Chovos HaLevavos tells us, which is something that is critically important, and that is, he wanted to inculcate in them a positive attitude, to look at things through positive light. Because if you look at dogs and you focus on the bad, then you're developing a habit. A person has a habit now of looking at bad things, and if he looks at the weather and says, oh, the weather is awful, it's terrible, oh, it's lousy, well, I can't take it, he's focusing on the negative. And if he gets up in the morning and he can't find his socks, oh man, this is just my luck, I can't find my socks, I mean, everything's always going wrong. And etc., etc., etc. The the myriads of things that we can complain about. And even though most of them are not a violation of the Torah, and they're not so terribly ethically awful, nevertheless, it develops in a person a negative type of way of looking at things, which will eventually manifest itself, possibly and unfortunately, in things that are problematic in his relationship with others, in his whole view on life, in his relationship with God. And so, it's important to, in these neutral areas, like passing by dead dogs, to develop a positive attitude, and in all matters to develop a positive attitude, because it forms habits within us, and that's who we become, and it impacts on all of our life. So I was thinking along this, we are inundated constantly by news which is so negative. We're complaining about this, and complaining about that, and complaining about that. Now, that could be very detrimental to our spiritual health by being constantly bombarded by all this negativity, this constant deluge of, oh, looking at the bad, and this is terrible, that's terrible, that's terrible. And we all know that if the news would be filled up with positive, happy, wholesome reports, it wouldn't be that interesting. And no one would buy the newspaper, and no one would watch that news report. So of course, they're interested in having customers, having people watch so they can sell their ads, etc. So they make the news as accurate, but also as negative, and also filled with all kinds of, be it gossip, or be it just general gripes, because that makes it much more interesting. So, of course, I'm not saying that we shouldn't follow the news, because there's a certain amount we have to know as regular people, as citizens, and that's up to each individual exactly how much that amount is. Nevertheless, I think it's really important that when we're following things, and even when we're talking to people and we're just keeping ourselves apprised of all the latest happenings, as much as possible, be on the guard and recognize that if I let this negativity into the way I think, and if I start talking in this negative way, then that is who I will become. Slowly, I will start looking at things in a negative light, and it will impact on every phase of my being, which from a Mussar perspective is not a good way to go. So, the next time you pass by a dead dog, make sure that you take note of how white its teeth are. And that goes for everything as well. See you next time.